Today's poetry is our very first Senryu-only edition of the Poetry Bee podcast. If you don't know what Senryu is, and it's a bit tricky to define in one sentence, do please go and have a listen to the few podcasts I've recorded recently, including the podcast with Bona M. Santos. She came along to inspire you to write for the next call out in September 2024. Links will be in the show notes, so do go and have a look. And a listen, or of course, a watch. There are slides on YouTube. In case you didn't know, or haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, it's quite simply Poetry P. Don't worry though. Yes, there will of course be a link in the show notes. My name is Patricia, and I'd like to welcome you to the Poetry P cast. Today I have a wonderful selection of poems for you from poets all around the globe and some visitors. Jenny Shepard and Ivanka Ettinger are with me to tell you which of the poems they've chosen to nominate for the judge's choice and why. There is a third nomination from Joan Morecambe, who wasn't able to join us. I wonder if you'll agree with them or have your own favourite. You're not allowed to choose your own piece, but if you disagree with them, do let me know. I'm excited to tell you that now we have submissions on a regular basis from every continent. Well, okay, all except Antarctica, but I think we can be forgiven for that one. Thanks to all of you who join me to listen, to take part, and to volunteer to do things at Poetry P. Thanks in particular, this time, to the editing team, Vandana Parashar, Ron Craig, Robert Horrobin, Liam Maguire, Lev Hart, and Matt Diffibor. They selected these poems for you today from the submissions. There are more in the journal, which will be out at the end of the month. Keep an eye on your mailbox. Everyone who signed up to the Poetry P mailing, it can be done on the website. Will be sent an email to let them know it's out. It's not just the Senryu from today that will be in it, plus extras of course. There are the video prompt poems too, chosen by the very lovely Linda L. Ludwig. You'll have heard them last week. Thank you too to all of you who sponsor the podcast with a membership of Poetry P. I could not continue without your help. But if you can't afford a membership, maybe you could buy Poetry P a coffee from time to time. The link is on the website. Now, enough of me wittering on. Shall we head off and listen to the poetry? Opening today's poetry offering, we have Jenny Shepard from London. Jenny, welcome back. It's very lovely to have you back on the podcast again.
Thank you, Patricia. And obviously I didn't do too badly last time then.
No, you did very well last time. Thank you. And thank you very much to all of you for taking the time to have a read of all the poems on offer and choosing your favourite. So shall we hear, Jenny, which one you chose and why?
Well, Patricia, unlike last time when I was a judge, I was able to narrow my choice down to 2 Senryu after only one reading of all the offerings. Strangely, they were both linked to babies or pregnancy. One was sad and one was funny. In the end, I went for the sad one, which was Marjolaine Rochsteg's poem, 20 minutes, the time I was an art. 20 minutes. The time I was an art. Only 8 words long, all short and simple words, with no abstract nouns or fancy adjectives. It still packs a huge punch. There is also something, for me, about the shortest line being the middle one, which adds to the impact. I think it takes a few seconds for the implications of the last line to sink in. I believe that she must be saying that a sibling, and I'm feeling strongly that it's her sister, gave birth to a child that died very soon after birth. That one step removed from the tragedy of a lost child somehow adds to the potency of this poem, because it reminds us that it's not just the parents of a dead baby that mourn that loss, but lots of other people as well. The way the poem is worded suggests to me that it's the first baby of the next generation, which feels especially poignant. Perhaps there are the poet's parents who'd have been looking forward to being grandparents. And what really affected me and why this poem jumped out at me right away was that I have three sisters who would have felt something like the poet did when I had a stillbirth nearly 25 years ago. It made me think about their feelings at that time and not just my own. Marjolaine has described a tragic event in her life and how it still affects her, but we have no idea how long ago it was. And here she's making an important point about grief, I think. It never goes away and can still jump up and make us weep with no warning many years after a bereavement. This is the magic of a great Senryu, simple yet complicated.
Jenny, thanks for choosing this one and for being so open with us about your own experience.
Well, I write about it a lot.
Bless your heart. I don't know if you feel this way, but it's so difficult when you're in the thick of it and wrapped up in the whole experience and the grief yourself to even think about people on the edges of your grief. So I thought this was a very interesting poem for that reason, if other ones as well, but particularly for that reason. And it also illustrates how Senryu, which we always or often talk about as a humorous poem, is also there to cover dark episodes of life and the human experience. So thank you very, very much for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
New moon, the bright white glow of my menobelly. New moon, the bright white glow of my menobelly. Adele Evershed. Adele, that was a term I hadn't known before. Thank you for introducing me to it. To-do list. Someday everything will be done. To-do list. Someday everything will be done. Alison Whipple. An atheist praying, to whom it may concern. An atheist praying, to whom it may concern. Alvin B. Cruz. Night shift. Scared to death of the farting corpse. Night shift. Scared to death of the farting corpse. Alvaro Carrasquel Gomez. Monday at the gym. Sunday night whiskey dripping on the treadmill. Monday at the gym. Sunday night whiskey dripping on the treadmill. Amy Watson. Sink full of dishes, I sneer at the smiley face sponge. Sink full of dishes, I sneer at the smiley face sponge. Anne Sullivan. Off to college. The main road along a river leading to the ocean. Off to college. The main road along a river leading to the ocean. Anthony Lusardi. Anthony, I've never thought about it like that before, but that's a really great way to explain the opening of your horizons when you head off to university. At the wake, enemies make friends through their tears. At the wake, enemies make friends through their tears. Ash. Flight law. The window passenger turns up last. Flight law. The window passenger turns up last. Biswajit Mishra. It's so true, isn't it? Always happens. Her face is foreign, but her finger has a familiar ring. Her face is foreign, but her finger has a familiar ring. Bob Zaslow. And our next one is a little bit of illusion. I wonder if you'll know the song. Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. Jet lag. Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. Jet lag. Bruce H. Feingold. Dud nutshells. After every tragedy, thoughts and prayers. Dud nutshells. After every tragedy, thoughts and prayers. Krista Pandy. Moving on, she places the folded shirts on another shelf. Moving on, she places the folded shirts on another shelf. Christine Wenck Harrison. This next one takes me back to my teenage years. Saturday's new shoes. Walking like John Travolta. Saturday's new shoes. Walking like John Travolta. Christopher Chupp. A prisoner paints the lieutenant's portrait. Times of war. A prisoner paints the lieutenant's portrait. Times of war. Claire Vogel Camargo. Ballet class. The sudden urge to morph into a frisky puppy. Ballet class. The sudden urge to morph into a frisky puppy. Colette Kern. Partial eclipse. Days past the stroke, his words still dark. Partial eclipse. Days past the stroke, his words still dark. Kurt Paulish. Mental gymnastics, keeping up with the pills. Mental gymnastics, keeping up with the pills. Cynthia Anderson. The fly in the lampshade, not knowing the way out. The fly in the lampshade, not knowing the way out. Daniel Birnbaum. Peacock strutting outside the maths huts. Non-uniform day. Peacock strutting outside the maths huts. Non-uniform day. David Cox. Not enough ink and paper to paint it away. Not enough ink and paper to paint it away. Diane Risker Taylor. Beachfront casino. The waves and I. break ourselves. Beachfront casino, the waves and I break ourselves. Eric Lohman. His temper gets the better of her. Apple maggots. His temper gets the better of her. Apple maggots. Erin Castaldi. Turning my world upside down, rain on the pane. Turning my world upside down, rain on the pane. Florence Hayhoe. Evening moonshine, I moon, the moon. Evening moonshine, I moon, the moon. Gordon Gearhart. Well now, Gordon, another one that takes me back to my childhood. One of my uncles, and he'll remain nameless, used to either brew moonshine, or poteen, as we'd call it, or he knew a good source. I can't quite remember which, but either way, I remember there would be poteen at various family parties. And I can well imagine people mooning the moon, having had a good old drink of it. Speaking of drinking, thank you to everyone who's bought me a coffee, bought the show notes, become a member, because it really does help me to keep the show on the road. And I don't know if I've told you, but I'm saving up now to make a trip to the west coast of the US for Haiku North America next year, where I hope I can spread the word about Poetry P and all that we do here. So every coffee, every membership, every show note helps. Thanks very much. My bucket list and the list of my illnesses. Chronophobia. My bucket list and the list of my illnesses. Chronophobia. Hassan Zemmouri. Apparently, I didn't know this, chronophobia is the extreme fear of time or time passing, which can cause severe anxiety, feelings of dread, obsessive behaviours and depression. People who are elderly, ill or imprisoned are apparently more likely to develop this anxiety disorder. There you go. Late for the funeral. Just one bar left in the battery. Late for the funeral. Just one bar left in the battery. Isabella Mori. First date. The basketball rims out. First date. The basketball rims out. Jacob Salzer. Bouncing off our conversation. Hail. Bouncing off our conversation. Hail. Jan Stretch. Lollipops. How quickly childhood fades away. Lollipops. How quickly childhood fades away. Nika. Gravity. My double chin grows more serious. Gravity. My double chin grows more serious. John Hawkhead. Middle school. My son learns to speak. Valley Girl. Middle school. My son learns to speak Valley Girl. Joshua St. Clair. Granddaughter asks why the moon follows us. Once I knew. Granddaughter asks why the moon follows us. Once I knew. Kelly J. White. A potter's hands, the way she unearths each vessel. A potter's hands, the way she unearths each vessel. Kim Clue. One last push, his cry remakes the world. One last push, his cry remakes the world. Kimberly Kuchar. Mining town. The visitor centre recommends the brothel tour. Mining town. The visitor centre recommends the brothel tour. Louise Hopewell. I think we might all have been to a town like that. I certainly have. No names. Rings of Saturn. I consider how much space he needs. Rings of Saturn. I consider how much space he needs. Laurie Kiefer. Front row seats. The juggler drops a smile. Front row seats. The juggler drops a smile. C.X. Turner. My darling talks courgette with the neighbour. His is bigger. My darling talks courgette with the neighbour. His is bigger. Marie Durley. Waiting for the koi to notice my crumbs. Waiting for the koi to notice my crumbs. Michael Flanagan. On her birthday, his gift of a kettle that turns itself off. On her birthday, his gift of a kettle that turns itself off. Mimi Ahern. Now, how would you feel if you got a present like that on your birthday? Answers on a postcard. Sudden twilight, in my son's beard a white hair. Sudden twilight, in my son's beard a white hair. Minal Sarosh. Dentist's chair, musing about the root of all problems. Dentist's chair, musing about the root of all problems. Mona Bedi. Evening walk, people avoid the beggar's eyes. Evening walk, people avoid the beggar's eyes. Muskan Ahuja. Now, Joanne Morecambe couldn't be with us today to read her choice for the nominations, so I'm going to read it for you. Thanks, Joanne. I'm just sorry I chose a day you couldn't be with us to record. Leaving the fast lane. Slippers, cardigan, teapot. Smelling the roses. leaving the fast lane, slippers, cardigan, teapot, smelling the roses. And that's by Clive Grucock. Joan says, as someone who's contemplating retirement, I can readily identify with the thoughts and feelings expressed in this Senryu. Like the poet, I look forward to staying comfortable and cosy, especially on cold winter days when the working world has to contend with ice, snow and freezing temperatures. I'll soon be finished with that unpleasantness. In the third line, I'm reminded to slow down and appreciate nature's beauty. However, since roses have thorns, retirement or withdrawal from life's busyness can have negative consequences, such as boredom, depression, loneliness and financial stress. It's best to plan ahead for any eventuality, because forewarned is forearmed, even in the so-called golden years, which may lose their lustre over time. In conclusion, Clive Grucock's seemingly simple poem overflows with insight and wisdom, while resonating with me as a poet and a retiree in the making. Thanks, Joan. And I'd just like to add to that I love the gentle humour of the piece. I'm in the same boat as Joan. Retirement is looming, but I remember all too well life in the fast lane. I sometimes live it, even today. That's quite possibly how I managed to fall off my bike. You should see my lovely shiny black eye. Leaving the fast lane, slippers, cardigan, teapot, smelling the roses. Nice one, Clive. Grandpa's stories. A toothpick flicks between his teeth. Grandpa's stories. A toothpick flicks between his teeth. Nalini Shetty. Borrowed anthology. Flipping pages to read the marginalia. Borrowed anthology. Flipping pages to read the marginalia. Nina Singh. From the Q train, high-rise invasion of Coney Island. From the Q train, high-rise invasion of Coney Island. Patricia Carragon. Twilight. Never too late to bury the hatchet. Twilight. Never too late to bury the hatchet. Paul Callis. Kintsugi, between us a fixed smile. Kintsugi, between us a fixed smile. Petro CK. Confessing sins I'd long forgotten. Sativa Skunk. Confessing sins I'd long forgotten. Sativa Skunk. Joshua Gage. Up. I had to look up Sativa Skunk. Yes, I'm that old and that boring. Didn't have a clue. Thanks, Joshua. You have widened my horizons. Artificial intelligence. I ask the humanoid about my past life. Artificial intelligence. I ask the humanoid about my past life. Pravat Kumar Paddy. Crossing the border, the conductor starts speaking in his dialect. Crossing the border, the conductor starts speaking in his dialect. Ram Chandran. Before tee-off, the wiggle of a bottom. Before tee off, the wiggle of a bottom. Ravi Kiran. Gambling with my weight. Sunday buffet at the casino. Gambling with my weight. Sunday buffet at the casino. Richard Tice. Post-war, a veteran's blanket in the doorway. Post-war, a veteran's blanket in the doorway. Robert Kingston. Culture wars, spreading Marmite. Culture wars, spreading Marmite. Robert Whitmer. I was over in the UK not so long ago, and I was in one of their supermarkets, and on the till next to me, yes, a manned till, imagine that, there were a couple buying Marmite and having a long discussion with the lady behind the till about whether they should be buying it or not. She was definitely not a Marmite lover. I almost joined in. Pregnant pause. Should I ask if it's a baby bump? Pregnant pause. Should I ask if it's a baby bump? Sally Bigger. I don't know about you, but I think if in doubt in that sort of situation, don't ask. Rush hour traffic. 1,000 stories crawl forward. Rush hour traffic. 1,000 stories crawl forward. Sandip Chauhan. Letter from a long-lost friend. Desert rain. Letter from a long-lost friend. Desert rain. Scott Wiggerman. Peak oil. Squeezing the last juice from dino bones. Peak oil. Squeezing the last juice from dino bones. Steve Barr. Fork in the road. The car idles. Fork in the road. The car idles. Susan Andrews. Heading into rain, she touches my knee at 60 miles an hour. Heading into rain, she touches my knee at 60 miles an hour. Tony Williams. Through a crack in a tomb's side panel, the boys hello. Through a crack in a tomb's side panel, the boys hello. Thomas Powell. Uncle's spare room, the damp smell of his solitude. Uncle's spare room, the damp smell of his solitude. Timothy Daly. Catching chickenpox from my baby cousin. Oh, the calamity. Not sure I did that one justice. You'd need to read it properly in the journal. Catching chickenpox from my baby cousin. Oh, the calamity. Oh, Tracy, you really set me a bit of a tongue twister there. That was by Tracy Davidson. And the next one, another allusion. Again, do you know where it's from? Stuck in Folsom Prison, the karaoke DJ sings to himself. Stuck in Folsom Prison, the karaoke DJ sings to himself. Valerie Werderhoff. A death poem writes itself. Long-term illness. A death poem writes itself. Long-term illness. Rowan Beckett Minor. I was wondering if next year we should do something on death poems. They're very interesting. What do you think? Email me with thoughts. Indeed, any thoughts for topics for next year. I should really be thinking about them now. And if you have books coming out and want to do a reading, do get in touch. I'll let you know how we proceed. And so let's head off and talk to Ivanka and finish the podcast. Today we have the return of the lovely Ivanka Ettinger. Good morning, Ivanka. How's things over there on the West Coast?
Oh, nice and sunny as usual.
You see it in the news sometimes that it does rain, and you sometimes do have terrible, terrible rain, don't you? And floods and so forth.
If it rains, it's awful, but usually that's what winter is called here.
You know what? I think over here in Europe, it's been like that for us all winter, spring, and we're just about coming into summer now. But we don't think we've got your temperatures. Although we're going to have a bit of a heat wave. Woohoo! Anyway, we're not here to do weather forecasts, although it's one of my favourite things. You chose something very interesting. I already know which one it is, and it covers. Well, you're going to tell us, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards, but could you please read this interesting Senryu, and then we'll find out who it was written by and what you think of it?
Yes, I can. Loading Less and Less, the Newspaper Boy. Loading Less and Less, the Newspaper Boy, by Govind Joshi. In this 7-word Senryu, Govind packs an emotional wallop. It begins with a one-word line, loading, which brings so many possibilities to mind, but quickly startles with the alliterative repetition of less and less. I immediately leapt to wondering why a computer would be loading less and less when their usage seems to be ever expanding. So the third line was quite a surprise, one that instantly struck my nostalgic heart with profound sadness. Ah, the newspaper boy. In the United States, the image of a boy, and later girls too, getting up early, riding their bicycle to pick up rolled newspapers and then throwing them onto the doormats of neighborhood houses, has long been the quintessential ideal of Americana, a testament to a first job, industrious fortitude, and a nation who embraces the importance of daily news from reliable sources. But this Senryu is a stark reminder that those ideals have been disappearing at an alarming rate. I recently read an article about the loss of local newspapers and how damaging it has been to the sense of community and reliability of information for those smaller and increasingly larger towns. Even the most famous newspapers in the country struggle with subscriptions to their printed versions. The Los Angeles Times recently shut down the printing press it had used for over 30 years because they couldn't afford the rent increases in downtown LA. Now it's being printed over an hour away. One of the many powers of Senryu is its ability to so succinctly expose issues of major importance to humanity. In these days of fake news and both-sidism, where facts and truth are continually called into question, the need for journalistic standards and ethics seem even more desperately needed. But the loss of the newspapers themselves, which this poem expertly relays, speaks to a change that now feels inevitable. I, for one, will truly miss the joy of opening a newspaper and reading it from cover to cover.
I can't remember when I last held a national newspaper in my hand and read it cover to cover. Although, I'm sorry, Ivanka.
Yes.
I do read one online every day.
Oh, me too.
And it's just easier for me, and it's one of my great joys to read the news every day from a source that at the moment I can still trust, which is becoming ever more problematical. But I thought you might be interested, given what you said, that my local area has a weekly free newsletter, or newspaper,
Oh,
I should
nice.
say. Yeah, but it's full of controversy because a rival has started up, and they've started up because they think that the local government, I suppose, my little sort of commune, is running, running the newspaper, and the newspaper is at its beck and call and just giving us the news that as per the local government people. So now we have a rival newspaper. It's really very interesting. So it's not completely dying out, but I can see an end to it. So thank you so much, Ivanka. And I do have a final request of you. Do you think you could read your Senryu to close out the podcast, please?
One way. A sure sign, I'll find another. One way. A sure sign, I'll find another.
Absolutely. And this one really made me smile, Ivanka, because I don't know if it's the way you intended it, but it felt like you were writing about a contrarian just like me. Because if someone tells me that I've got to go one way, I'm almost certain to try and go all around the houses to try and find another way to do something. Yeah, so
absolutely. And I was also thinking about one-wayism in haiku itself, and so how much I want to break the rules.
I know that also occurred to me, actually, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm such a stickler for rules. Probably
I know
business in me. I do try, but at the end of the day, I've got anyway. That's a discussion for another day. But for the sake of anyone listening, I am a stickler for the rules, but I'm not so much of a stickler that you shouldn't try and experiment with me. So anyway, thank you so much for that and for closing out the podcast. Thank you. Do you know, I'm always a little bit sad when we get to the end of a reading. But thank you to Jenny and to Ivanka, and of course Joan, for being our community judges this time. I'm exceedingly grateful. Thank you to everyone who submitted poems to Poetry P, because we'd be nothing without you. And thank you to the team I work with. They do lots behind the scenes and are a terrific bunch of people. And of course, thank you for your company. Do join me again next week. And if you're coming late to the podcast, check out what you should be submitting for. There's a drop-down menu on the submissions tab on the website that will guide you. So now I'm off for a bike ride. It's been a week since I had my little accident, and I think I really need to get back on the horse or I'm going to be nervous. Wish me luck. I'm going to be well padded this time. I'll look a bit of a sight, one way or another. Anyway, till next time, keep writing. And don't forget, there are links in the show notes. And if something is missing, do email me. Ciao!